Welcome to Natalie Saves the World, one podcast at a time. A space for honest conversations about mental health, self-love, living more consciously, finding clarity, and spreading light through all of life's challenges. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Natalie Saves the World, one podcast at a time. Today, my guest is Pete Odell. He is the founder of perdata.ai. Today, we're talking about something that I'm very passionate about and that I talk about quite a bit on the show, loneliness. Not just feeling lonely and isolated on a Saturday night, but the kind of deep chronic disconnection that we're now facing and seeing, and it's now being called a public health crisis. The U.S. Surgeon General has recently declared loneliness an epidemic, and studies show that lacking close friendships is as harmful to our health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And yet, most of us can't remember the last time we made a brand new friend, especially as adults. My guest today, Pete, has spent years thinking about why that is and building technology designed to actually fix it. Pete Odell is the CEO and founder of perdata.ai and the author of Dying for Friendship, a book that takes a comprehensive look at what's driving the loneliness epidemic and what we can do about it, both individually and as a society. Pete, welcome to the show. I'd love to hear a little bit just about your background and how you got to be where you are today.
Sure. So I'm Pete Odell, and as you mentioned, I'm the CEO of perdata.ai, a new startup company about 15 months old. And obviously, I'm a little older. I just turned 70, and so I am a senior founder. My co-founder is 63, so he's the junior partner.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
And we started the company about 15 months ago. Really, after I started out, I was in Italy, and I was looking for some fly fishing people, and I couldn't find them. And I'm like, wow, that's not right. Why can't I do that? I got all this technology. There's 2 billion people in the Facebook, swamp. Why can't I find a fisherman, right? And that was just kind of a German idea. And I came home and I was leaving my other global intelligence company and I wanted to do something meaningful really for the rest of my life. Now I started to do a little research, found the loneliest epidemic and how much more important it was than me finding other fly fishermen. And I got my friend of 38 years, Johan Wickman, and he said, well, he goes, must be a sign because I just quit my job last week. He goes, let's join up and do this together. And that's where the company came about. And he's in Seattle. I'm in Alexandria, Virginia. And we are just cooking along.
So the stars kind of aligned in terms of timing for both of you.
It did. Yeah, we were both looking for something both meaningful and important and lucrative all rolled into one.
Wow. And so it sounds like this kind of stemmed from your experience in Italy of wanting to find others in the fly fishing world. But what led you from this interesting transition from your background in cybersecurity to writing a book about friendship and building Perdata?
Well, this was my fourth book and Johan's first. So I've always found one of the best ways to get to know a topic is to really sit down and embrace it and try to become a thought leader first. And so I outlined the book. I had a lot of information. I interviewed probably 50 to 100 people that are in this space, people from the psychiatrist range, all the way to people that are doing potlucks. We're not psychologists. We're not psychiatrists. We're not telling you how to fix your problems, but we're giving you practical advice of how to go out there and deal with the fact that you might be lonely at different parts of your world and how to adjust for that.
Was there a particular moment aside from the trip in Italy that made you feel like this was truly urgent and made you feel like it was a wider, larger issue?
Just reading the stats when you mentioned one, but WHO has a statistic that 800,000 people die prematurely from loneliness every year. So it's like 100 an hour, right? I'm a member of Rotary. I just joined actually because they're such a well-aligned organization in terms of service over self. And they've been fighting polio for 50, 60 years, and polio is down to 100 cases a year. But loneliness is expanding, right? There are 1.4 billion people feel lonely on a fairly regular basis. So
it's crazy.
That's a big problem.
Yeah. No, it's literally, as we've talked about, it's a very big passion of mine as well. I worked previously at a startup called Intuition Robotics, and they kind of opened my eyes to the loneliness epidemic. And this was years ago, even before COVID. And it was more so regarding older adults, so senior citizens who are isolated at home. They don't see their family very often. But now what's so interesting is that they're like the baby boomers are actually the least lonely generation, supposedly, whereas Gen Z is the loneliest generation. Why do you think that is? Do you think it's because they have all those like pseudo connections online that make them
Um,
feel even more so more
no,
lonely?
I think without the soccer mom phenomenon, the Gen Z would be equally the group you mentioned. When you have kids, you have to go interact with your kids' friends and
Right.
their school people. So that's why that chunk of people that have kids may be a little less lonely, but left to their own devices, they've got divorces, they've got financial stressors, moves, and those all cause the kind of transitions where even though as a general group, they might not be lonely, there's a whole bunch of lonely in there too.
Yeah, very true. So I know that you mentioned your trip to Italy, reading all of these stats, and that sort of started to make this feel more urgent to you. Where did the idea for Connexus come from, and what role did Johan play in all of this?
So we started looking at what was out there. We looked at social media. We looked at a number of things. We also had a very interesting email discussion with Robert Dunbar, and we were focused on it being an AI company. Robert Dunbar has a friend matrix where you can't really have more than 150 friends. And
Hmm.
our initial focus was, well, wow, with AI, maybe we can have people make 300 friends, right? And we actually sent Robert Dunbar, who's a very well-known professor at Oxford, a note saying, what do you think? And he was a little non-committal, but he goes, well, I'll see with AI, right? Nobody wants to predict, and they shouldn't. But his very good point was it's the opposite problem you should be focused on, which is nobody has any friends anymore. He goes,
Yeah,
very few people are focusing on, I got too many friends.
yeah,
It's, I only have one, I have zero. I don't have anybody I could call in the middle of the night if something bad happens. So we turned around and started focusing on how can we help people get connected at places where people gather. And that's where the Connexus part came from. And Connexus is only one piece of technology that we've designed. We have an entire kind of next generation social infrastructure where you make friends and then you're able to keep track of your friends. You're able to share information with your friends privately, all with no Mark Zuckerberg, right? So you don't have to go
yeah.
into the swamp with the 2 billion people, the trolls, the
All
bots,
the
the ads.
ads.
You don't have to be addicted. Our
Yeah,
technology is designed to get you into it, make you some friends, and then tell you to go spend time with your friends. We don't want you in our app. If you're in our app 6 hours a day, you've got a problem because you need to use it to go meet people. And people are the important part of this entire loneliness problem.
yeah, I agree. I think a big part of the problem is that a lot of these apps now were designed. I know quite a bit about app monetization and how all this works. And a lot of these apps were designed to keep you on the app as opposed to getting out there in the real world. Like, for example, the dating apps, the way that they work is they're incentivized the way that they monetize these apps. They don't want you to leave, right? If you're leaving Hinge or you leave Tinder, then they lost a customer for life. They want to keep you on there. So I
Yep.
think that's part of the problem as well.
And we've designed our entire strategy is around none of that. So we're a business to business application. So as a simple
Amazing.
example, a cruise ship would pay us for our software, and then they'd send out a notification to the 2,000 people that are coming on the cruise a few months ahead of time. And those people would fill out their profile. They're still protected privately. They didn't have to put in their name. They didn't have to put in their sex, their weight, their age, their political persuasion. But now suddenly when you're getting on that cruise ship, instead of it being 2,000 random people, which is terrible in every
Yeah.
situation, right?
Could be intimidating too if you went there yourself.
Yep. And you'll meet some random people. I mean, everybody does today. But
Yeah.
instead, when you get on, it's like, I already know there are 14 bourbon drinking fly fishermen who run, right? And that
Yeah.
happens to be my three passions, right? It's like, okay, so there's 2,000 people on the ship. I want to meet the fly fisherman first, the bourbon drinker second, and the runner third, right? I'm able to select out of that pool of humanity the people that have a much higher chance of becoming a long-term friend of mine and are probably going to be enjoyable more in the short term.
It's
And
primarily based on the common shared interests rather than like personality traits or life experiences. Have you
yeah,
thought about those applications as well?
sure. And our software is adaptable to all those things depending upon who wants to use our software. I mean, our software can be branded with logos. We can add specific questions. It's very easy to customize. In this new world with software, it used to be you wrote software, took you a year, then you had to make another revision that took you 6 months. With some of the AI coding tools today, you can write a piece of software in a week. And it's all mostly based on your design experience and your capability for understanding what the app does. But the code is no longer a barrier. And then you can
Right.
revise that code in a few days and make it better faster. So you're going to see a great generation of new applications, not just in the loneliness space, but everywhere where suddenly it's like, some of the old stuff that was very frustrating, it will suddenly be replaced by something new and fresh because somebody's taken a new look at it and done a new piece of software.
Well, your book digs into kind of the topic of loneliness on a larger scale and kind of the factors driving it on a wider scale. Can you give us kind of the big picture in terms of like, how did we get here? How did we become so lonely?
So America and the world in general from about 1901 to the mid 60s was on a gigantic upward curve in terms of people joining and seeing each other and being with each other. Two fundamental organizations that got started during that period. One was the YMCA. For the first time ever, the factories were hiring kids from their villages where they had all kinds of friends, bringing them into London. And suddenly they're like, I'm lonely. I don't know any of these other kids, right? And when
Yeah.
you've got a small prefrontal cortex, like most men do at 18, and I certainly did, you can make some poor decisions, right? So some smarter, older adults formed a Bible study and said, hey, why don't you guys come over here and we'll build this fellowship of people that suddenly do need friends, right? And that's been 180 years. And the Y is one of the most trusted brands on the planet in terms of community and reaching out and trying to help people do that. They could do a lot more, believe me, we're trying to help them. The other one is Rotary. Rotary is another very interesting organization. It started because there were 5 guys in Chicago who were lonely in 1905. And they said, well, let's have a meeting. And the reason they called it Rotary is because they said, well, how about it at your office the first time? We'll have it at your office the second time. And they rotated the meetings. And it took off like wildfire because at that moment in time, there were a huge number of people in the urban areas, especially, who were lonely, right? So we had this great period of people joining, all these things expanded all the way right up until about 1963. And in 1963, and this is all documented by a guy named Robert Putnam at Harvard, a book called Bowling Alone. There's a whole set of research that's been done. But up around 1963, people moving to the suburbs, people getting bigger houses with dens and bigger TVs. And you didn't have to go out to, to your bowling league and those kinds of things. And so since then, you started with TV, you started with big houses, but then along came the PC and AOL and all the cat videos that showed up there.
The internet.
So social media started on AOL and expanded some more. And then along came the iPhone, right? And then if the iPhone couldn't make things any worse with Facebook, then along came the pandemic and locked everybody inside. So now you've got billions of people whose social muscles have atrophied, and they're like still sitting home on the couch. Almost nothing has recovered from COVID, pre-COVID levels in terms of involvement and people joining. And so that's how we got there. Now the question is, how are we going to fix this? And the reason our book is called Dying for Friendship and Community is David Brooks, the New York Times columnist who's now working for the Atlantic. He wrote a book called The Second Mountain that we really took to heart. And the second mountain was, your first mountain is what you do for you, and your second mountain is what you leave behind. So the book was really accentuating both. 800,000 people are dying because of loneliness, but we're going to go fix this, and we probably won't fix it before we're all not part of this planet, right? If we do, we'll do something else, but it's kind of doubtful. It's a big problem.
Yeah,
so
it is.
It is a big deal.
Well, I'm curious. So it sounds like a lot of this has to do with technology, like just the advancement of technology. I find it a little bit ironic because on the one hand, a lot of these tools, they were originally developed to connect people. So for example, social media or Facebook, you could look at it initially on the one hand, these tools were kind of created to connect us in this new way and connect us 24/7. And we're, digitally connected all the time. And yet they're contributing to real loneliness in terms of like face-to-face human interaction, which we're now getting much less of. Do you find that tends to be true? Like, has technology accelerated the dive into loneliness?
Oh, yeah. I mean, when Facebook first started, about 80% of Facebook was you interacting with your friends. Today, it's like 12%.
Right. It's all ads.
You're watching entertainers, you're watching kids dance,
Viral videos.
You're watching 80% of the stuff you watch on Instagram and everything else has nothing to do with you.
Your
It's
friends.
just there to entertain you. So when you go from spending time focused on your friends to just watching, hour after
Random
hour
stuff.
of
Yeah.
entertainment. Or on the other side, of doom scrolling, it's the news kills you.
Yeah.
And every time Trump, says something, or every time something bad happens, or you're suddenly on your phone, reading, writing, stuff. Yeah, the technology has really, because of the dopamine and the
Yeah.
addiction area of trying to get more monetization. If I can show you 5 more ads, I made $4 more or $10 more, right? You're the product now. All your information isn't private. All your information's being held in some place where people can buy it like crazy to try to sell you more stuff. So it is cutting into the amount of time you have to be social. I
In
read
real
something
life.
yesterday, right before we started. I was starting to check the math, but somebody told me that a 5-year-old today, if they live to be 90, is going to spend 21 years on their phone at the current
Wow.
rate. So imagine
It's
spending
crazy.
21 years. My mom used to kick my ass if I watched more than 2 hours of television.
Yeah, right.
She'd be like, "You get outside,
Same.
don't do something."
My
Right?
parents too. Or with the computer. Yeah, same.
Yeah. Oh,
Hmm.
as well, the screen time today, it's not 2 hours. It's you can spend, 12.
Yeah.
And it is a big detractor.
It's very addicting, these
Yeah.
technologies.
Well,
Like
by
I
design.
Yeah. No, and it's ironic because a lot of the founders of these products don't let their own children use them.
Yeah.
It's just funny. I personally don't use any social media since COVID, actually. I found that looking on Instagram during COVID made me feel really bad about myself. I experienced a lot of like FOMO, fear of missing out. You interpret what people put, like this very curated fake version of their life, as real. And so you then start to feel bad about yourself. Well, I'm not doing that. And you compare yourself. And I just cold turkey decided to delete it during COVID. And once I deleted it, I never looked back. I do have one now for this podcast just to promote it here and there, but I don't use it personally. And I find that I'm just much happier without it.
If you could convince the other 9 billion people to drop it, that'd be
I
great.
know it's crazy. And they're so addicted and they spend so
Let's
many
do it
hours on
right
there.
here.
I mean, literally, I used to spend, I believe, over 3 hours a day on Instagram. And exactly as you said, most of it was like just getting sucked into addicting loopholes. And none of it made me feel good about myself. None of it was like truly making me happy. And so once I deleted it, I just never looked back. And now I really don't miss it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I was spending hours of my day wasted on there, just getting sucked into the algorithm. And yeah, I think a lot of people are just so unaware of what it's doing to them.
Well, or what the opportunity is on the other side, which is God, when you switch from dopamine to now I'm going to drop the name of the drug, but there's a naturally produced drug that you have when you're with friends. I think it's
Oh,
oxytocin or something like that.
oxytocin or
Yeah, oxytocin.
serotonin or
So when you
yeah,
switch from dopamine to that, suddenly your whole world gets better, right? Things look
yeah,
brighter, it's better. And suddenly you've got memory. I mean, how many memories of Instagram you have, right? Whereas if you
none.
start listing the memories you have with your friends, there are
Yeah,
indelible memories. And
yeah,
then they're never going to go away. You're going to have them for another 50, 60, 70 years, hopefully,
very
or
true.
maybe longer. Who knows? That's a
But
whole
I
other
worry.
podcast.
Yeah, no, no, definitely. But I do worry about like these younger kids. So I have a 14-year-old, or she's now 15, my little half sister, and she is already on all of these things. She has an Instagram. I don't know if she has TikTok, but I'm sure her friends do. And from this young age, they're already addicted to these tools and using them basically all day, every day, to the point where like I asked her, I was like, well, why don't you just not use that stuff? And she said, well, if I didn't use it, I wouldn't have any friends because that's all they talk about in school now is what happened on
Right.
Instagram. That's all they talk about in school is what somebody Snapchatted to somebody. So it's creating this whole world online, but all of it is not real. It's all just a persona,
Yep.
curated online persona.
Jonathan Haidt, he wrote The Anxious Generation. He's done a bunch of research. He doesn't want to have kids to even have a phone until they're 16
Yeah.
or maybe even 18.
I didn't have a smartphone until college. I had a flip phone. I could make calls on it and I could
Yeah.
do texting, which took like 10 minutes to send one text, but I didn't get a smartphone with data on it or anything until I was 19. And honestly, like I could go back to not having one. It's just nice, mainly for directions, like for GPS, it's nice.
Yeah.
And FaceTime is nice because I have relatives overseas, but I could go without all the social media, all the apps, pretty much just the calling and
Yeah.
texting.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, I think you talk about this a little bit in the book as well. There's a real difference between being alone and being lonely, right? You can enjoy being alone without being lonely per se. How do you define loneliness and why is it so dangerous to our health?
Well, loneliness is a warning signal. It's like thirst, right? Or a
Yeah.
pain in your calf. It's like there's something wrong, right?
Hmm.
So solitude, I was down in North Carolina this week. Saturday, we did a neighborhood event where we had 75 neighbors all come over to one neighbor's house and everybody met each other.
Oh, so
We had
fun.
food, and the people who held it had built this incredible community garden where people could come and meditate, read, and they were willing to let everybody in the neighborhood use it.
Hmm.
Didn't want them planting stuff there, but so we had this great thing on Saturday, totally social, everybody making friends. But Sunday, I was there by myself because I had some meetings on Monday, and I went fishing twice. I went out, rented a couple of kayaks, was out fishing for 2 hours each time. That solitude is not, it's not painful, it's not a warning, it's fantastic, right?
Yeah.
And so solitude is uplifting,
Intentional solitude.
loneliness is crushing, right? Very easy to tell the difference.
So would you say the difference is kind of like one is intentional and the other is unintentional?
Well, one is intentional because, if you love solitude, you're going to go make it happen. The
Yeah.
other one is it is a warning sign. It's like, hey, there's something wrong here. We got to go do something about this. It's very quickly becoming clear to everybody that your diet, your exercise habits, and now your social connection habits are kind of the three pillars of the stool that you have to have in order to kind of lead a well-balanced life. And
Right.
friendship takes work. I mean, it's not, you just can't go, oh, I got enough friends. Do you really? Number one, do you really?
Yeah.
And then number two, how good of care are you taking of them? When was the last time you talked to them, right? And one of the things I would tell people is, look, if you want more friends, it's hard to go out and make new friends, right? You got to make an effort. But one of the most untapped resources for people are the people that used to be their friends. The
Yeah.
people you could call up and say, hey, remember when we went golfing down at such and such? And I haven't talked to you in 6 years. And I have a fairly large number of friends. It's funny, the two co-founders in our company, one has about 25, and I can actually go up to the Dunbar 150, right? Especially after I went and called a bunch of old friends and reconnected.
Yeah.
But I reached back as far as 42 years to my old college roommate I hadn't talked to since. And we had a great catch up and we've talked a couple of times since. And so that's one of the best ways to get to reestablish. Because if you just moved into a neighborhood, it can be hard. There are clubs. You can do a Connexus event. Now, the one thing we have done for the motivated people, right? The people who are like, you know what? I can do this myself. Is we've just put out a free friendship kit using our software with PowerPoints, with videos, with invites, with all the suggestions of where you can have it. And so that gives people a chance to say, you know what? I take this in my own hands. I'm going to go invite 100 people or 50 people or 25, or I'm going to go out and advertise my friendship event at the coffee shop. I'm going to use the library community room because it's free and they don't allow food. So I don't have to worry about being a big expense on my part. Or I'll do a potluck, right? I'll invite 50 people and say, we're going to do a potluck. But guess what? The main thing is you don't all cluster with each other that you already know. The main thing is we're going to try to help people make friends and find out where there's intersection, right? And people can walk out going, I'm going to call her later. I'm going to call him later. We're going to go for a run, join Rotary. And when I did my presentation for Rotary, I talked about being a fly fisher, right? And about 6 weeks after I did my presentation, I was attending another meeting. And this guy comes, sits down to me. He goes, I think we've met. He goes, I'm Joe. He goes, I got 2 fly rods at home in my closet. He goes, I bought them when I retired. What should I do? And I'm like, well, we're going to be friends. I'm going to go teach you how to fly fish. Right. And it didn't take 200 hours to make that connection happen. The shared passion. When we were in Seattle at one of the hotels working, and these 25 people came in, and we thought they were a group. And we said, do you guys know each other? And they're like, no. But they go, look, once you're an Ohio State fan, you're part of the family, right? You immediately have a big thing of friends if you're with that group, right? Everybody bought in and, you can start a lot of other conversations, but boy, you got one that everybody just is fanatical about.
Very true. Yeah, I think on the one hand, there's the shared interests. And then on the other hand, there's kind of like the shared values. And that's actually what brings me to my next question, which is, do you think part of the reason that people are more lonely now is sort of due to the loss of religion or traditional religion, like going to church, going to synagogue? Organized religion has become kind of less popular. Do you think that's contributing to this as well?
Yep. I mean, the move away from 60% of the people going to church down
Yeah.
to, I think it's 22%.
Wow.
I think it's definitely a factor.
Yeah.
I think it's also, it can be a big part of the solution.
Yeah.
I actually had somebody out when I was down in North Carolina this weekend. He goes, if the churches would just tear down the steeple and have a lot more friendly events, he goes,
Yeah.
you can still find God, but he goes, there'd be no stigma and a lot more people would show up,
I
right?
agree.
I actually think it's more the political situation than the church stuff.
Really.
I think that people are so, especially at least where I live
Polarized.
in Alexandria, people are hair trigger sensitive to walking up to a stranger because you don't know what you're going to get, right? And suddenly, whichever side you're on, there's a 10% lunatic fringe on the left and on the right. And when you run into one, it's a very unpleasant situation. And it
That's
makes,
true.
it makes walking up to somebody, right? Where's a shared
Yeah.
interest? I mean, another story I tell is when I go through an airport, I am not an extrovert, but I am a fanatical fly fisherman. If I see a guy with a fly rod case or a
Yeah.
hat someplace I've been, I'll walk up to that person because I know he's one of my people, right? And the only weird
You know
thing that
that they're
ever
safe.
happened is I walked up to a guy and says, "Where are we going fishing today?" And he's like, "Oh, we're not." He goes, "There's no fly rod in this case." And I'm like, "I'm so sorry." He
Uh,
goes, "No, no." He goes, "It was my grandfather's case." He goes, "I'm an architect." He goes, "I love my grandfather. He tried to teach me how to fly fish." But he goes, "I roll up all my architectural drawings and keep them in his fly
oh,
fishing
no
case
way.
as a way to remember him." So we had a
That's
lovely
great.
20-minute talk. Take a
It's
bunch of men and you go and tell that guy you like his shoes. They're like, "Oh, what are you crazy? I'm not going to do that."
haha. I do that all the time.
I'm going to do it.
No, definitely. I can attest to religion being a big factor that can help people make friends, or because of the lack of it, the lack of traditional, worship, it's contributing to loneliness 100%. I personally am pretty involved in the Jewish community, and I've made almost all my friends just from going to those events, mostly cultural, just like Friday night dinners. And it's been an amazing way to make friends. And I think that more of that needs to happen for all religions, or it doesn't necessarily need to be affiliated with the religion itself, but just something cultural that you
Yep.
all have a shared interest in. And then the friendships evolve naturally that way.
Yep.
And I very much agree with you regarding the extremes of the politics right now. I'm pretty balanced. So I have friends in both camps, if you will. And so therefore that doesn't deter me from talking to someone. But exactly as you said, the extreme factor, like if you're talking to someone who has a very extreme opinion, which can happen, those fringe examples. But I think that's also part of the problem is that we've become so polarized that people have forgotten that there is still so much common ground. And there are many things that we can still agree on, no matter
Yep.
what camp you belong to, what side identify with. I think that people just are so afraid to have those conversations that they often run away as opposed to hearing each other out.
Well, and the other side of it is when you do it face to face, the amount of respectability raises tremendously.
Oh, yeah.
So, when you're in a room face to face with people, they try to be less abrasive, less
Yeah.
judgmental. It's
Extreme.
much harder to be a jerk in person than it is to be online, where some of the stuff that gets written online
Oh, yeah.
just amazes me.
Yeah. Why do you think that is? Because it's more anonymous feeling, it's less personal.
Oh, sure. Yeah, but when
Yeah.
it's like the Wizard of Oz, right? He's behind the screen, he can
Behind
do anything he wants. So
Right.
people want to feel powerful can feel totally powerful behind the, anonymous postings and that kind of stuff. But,
Yeah.
you get them in a room and it tends to be much better because especially,
Yeah.
in a community that is continual, everybody knows who their triggers are, right? And it becomes kind of self-policing, I think, in most groups.
Yeah.
So.
Very true.
But we got a lot to learn. And this is, we've been talking a lot about the US. The same issues apply internationally as well. I mean, it's not a,
I'm sure.
especially the developed countries have a little bit more of loneliness. And I have a banker who moved here from Vietnam. And she said when she was in Vietnam and grew up, everybody in the village knew everybody in the village. She came here. She now
Right.
works for one of the major banks. And she said she's had a very hard time making friends here in the US because of the cultural transition. But that transition happens for kids that had 12 years of grade school and high school with their friends, and now they're suddenly one of 20,000 freshman at Arizona State University. When I was a veteran, I moved 4 times to different bases. Nobody ever said, "Oh, let me find you some new friends," right? It was, like the cruise ship, right? Except you didn't even get to pick who you're bunking with. And you go move for work, right? And you go from, I went from Colorado to Seattle. I got to make new friends, and I went from Seattle to Oregon, Oregon to California, back to Seattle, kept some of the old ones. So I've kind of got friends scattered all over, but I do a fair amount of effort to keep in touch with them. I actually have a little bit of a list where I'll try to make sure every 3 months I'll reach out in some way, shape, or form.
Why do you think it's so challenging to make friends as an adult as opposed to as a child? Do you think there's a stigma involved? Do you think that people feel like lame or something going up to a stranger and chatting them up? Why do you think that it's so challenging to make friends as we get older, especially?
I think people, like the old get set in your ways thing. I think people are like, look, I don't really want to
They
do
don't
it.
want to change.
I got enough. I got 2 friends, right? I got Bill and
Mhm.
Joe, and we play golf together, and sometimes Harry shows up, right? And even though their wives are like, "Would you go make some friends? Because we really like you out of the house more. Why don't you go, why don't you go join a club?" People are, and the pandemic really did it, make people sedentary.
Yeah.
And, I need a cultural reawakening, not only as friends, but it's like, God, let's all go volunteer. Let's all
Mhm.
go meet our neighbors in case there is a hurricane and we all got to figure out how to, survive together and help each other. There's about 20 interlocking reasons for getting out of the house and go spending time with your community. And, the friends part happens almost naturally. I mean, if you get out there with people and you're a nice person and you listen more than you talk, it tends to work itself out, right? You're gonna find yourself. Sitting on the couch is gonna get you nowhere.
Very true. I personally am pretty extroverted. Like I'm pretty comfortable going up to strangers. I'm the type of person who chats people up at the airport in line. I think part of it is my personality and part of it is I actually traveled solo for 4 months. I did a big trip across Asia and I had never traveled by myself before. And due to that trip, I was forced into a lot of situations where I was by myself with a bunch of strangers, and so I just got very comfortable doing things alone, first of all, without feeling judged or feeling any stigma about it. Like I would go out to eat by myself. I would go, to a bar by myself and just sit there and talk to the bartender because I realized that nobody's judging us the way that we think they are, right? Like a lot of that's in our head. If anything, if they see you out talking to the bartender, they might think like, wow, good for them. They're so, outgoing. They're so comfortable and confident. But also because I was forced into a lot of these situations where I was by myself, I just became very comfortable talking to strangers. And I realized that people appreciate it so much and they want someone to engage with them and they want someone to start the conversation with them. They're just in their own heads a lot of the time and very insecure and anxious and judging themselves much more than anyone else is judging them. So since this trip, I've now applied this just to life back home and I'm so comfortable in all sorts of situations. Like I show up to networking events by myself all the time. I go to singles events by myself all the time. And I think that's a very rare skill now.
Yep.
Unless you've had that type of trip, unless you've had the type of experiences that you have where you're moving all over and kind of forced to grow that muscle, a lot of people are still uncomfortable with putting themselves out there.
The very first presentation I did on my company was at the old Presbyterian Meeting House in Alexandria, where George Washington used to go to church occasionally. So it's been
Oh, wow.
around for 250 years come July 4th, or more than that.
Wow.
But it was the men's fellowship, and a few guests showed up. We went through loneliness. We also talked to everybody who's interested in AI. So I gave an AI presentation about where that's going. And that's going to have some new impacts. The one thing we didn't talk about was a real danger, which are these digital friends, right? Where,
I was going to ask that. I'm glad you
yeah,
brought that up. People are getting like AI girlfriends, AI companions. Do you think that AI is going to accelerate this even further, potentially?
I think it's kind of like alcohol, right? Or recreational marijuana, right? In the right doses, it's a great thing to have in your life occasionally, right? But when it becomes a dependency, it becomes a problem. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
when if you're suddenly so afraid to go out of the house that you're willing to talk to your digital friend for hours on end, you got to realize it's just cycling back what you want to hear.
Yeah,
And you're
it is.
ultimately, I don't know. It just, that to me seems incredibly dangerous from a short term standpoint. But the part that would really worry me as a parent, and I'm not a parent, I have a couple of four quasi adopted grandkids through my girlfriend. If those kids get a digital friend and they start telling their digital friend their innermost thoughts, right? They're out there by themselves. Well, guess what? Somebody's recording those. Somebody is putting those in a database. And 30 years from now, was going to run for president, and they're going to go, well, wait to hear what Joey said when he was 13 on his digital friend, right?
Yeah, so true. Or using it for creepier ways,
It's
even.
creepy.
Yeah.
And the fact that it enriches, we have enough inequality problems that, making Mark Zuckerberg a 2 trillionaire instead of one, it just doesn't appeal to me. I'd much rather spend time with human to human type efforts.
Well, I know we talked about this a little bit at the beginning of the episode, but the Surgeon General has called this a public health crisis. What does the research actually say when it comes to chronic loneliness and what it does to us physically?
Well, it says it's a terrible thing.
I know there's the smoking the 15 cigarettes a day. I've seen that one for years.
Oh, but it's heart disease, it's diabetes. It literally it's like a cloud, right?
It's contributing to earlier death.
It's the same thing as not exercising
Smoking.
for 25 years. It's like, well, what's going to happen? Well, this is going to wear out. This is going to wear out. You're not going to be able to walk up the stairs. You accumulated cholesterol. Longevity has become a big deal with friendship. So I went to the Michael Milken Future of Health Conference, which was fantastic. But there was a longevity guy, and the longevity guy got up and he said, look, if you don't have a big circle of friends, you're going to die sooner. It's as simple as that. But he said, here's the other thing to think about. If you don't have a big circle of friends, why do you want to live longer? What are you going to do? True. It's just a good lesson in you got to have your friends. And as you get older, there's nothing wrong with having 20-year-old friends. There's nothing wrong with having 40-year-old friends. If you're 70, you don't have to have all 70-year-old friends, right? My girlfriend's dad died. He's 102. And he was a World War II veteran. He died about 3 years ago. And we had the funeral. And the amazing part of that funeral was over half the people in the crowd were under 50 years old because he had been a mentor for all these years. And he had a hell of a time making phone calls at the end, but he would still reach out 10 times a day on his phone that I was able to put big buttons on and stay in touch with all these people he had touched through his life. So it was just the family was there, all the old family, all that kind of stuff. But there were just a ton of people that had met Gus and just said, you know what, I'm going to his service. He's a great guy to me. So there's lots to aspire to there. And we've got a lot of seniors. This is a whole separate podcast. We got a whole lot of seniors just rotting away who are extremely smart, articulate, capable. It's like, get out. I know a bunch of them, right? They're like, why aren't you retired? I'm like, because I got stuff to do.
Yeah. No, I mean, my grandma's 88 years old and she is a powerhouse. Not only socially, like she volunteers, she has lots of friends, she takes courses even at the university sometimes. She's very active with her family. She just has a very fulfilling life. And I think that's why she's 88 and still so thriving and functional is because she has those close social connections. And she says the same thing. Like she sees some people her age who just really let themselves go and don't want to keep growing and learning and developing themselves. And she sees it as very sad. Yep. A friend of mine does Meals on Wheels. And he said in some cases, he is the only human contact the people he delivers Meals on Wheels to have. Yep. Oh my God. I mean, they brought me to tears. We were having coffee and he explained it to me. And I'm like, oh my God, really? Really, the product in my previous company, why we were developing it originally was for this exact same reason. The fact that their own children don't visit them, they could be alone and isolated for weeks or months on end. It was just something to talk to, kind of like a cat, if you will, like a pet, someone to interact with. It was a robot that interacted with them. But it's very sad and it's definitely increasing. Definitely among older adults, that's a whole other can of worms. But I just find it so interesting that it's now affecting the younger and younger generations, even more so, arguably. Yep. Well, and then it sets a bad, precedent for the next 80 or 100 years that they're going to have to deal with. Social skills are in decline. Invaluable. And I mean, who knows with AI and the robots, maybe we don't need our social skills. No, I disagree. I think we need them more than ever. I think that what I've noticed in this world of hyper connectedness online and more content being created and more AI and all of this, I think that what's still so valuable is human face-to-face interaction.
Yep.
More so than ever. I mean, people are craving it. People are literally dying for it, as we said.
Yep.
And for example, in-person conferences, it's so funny because I've worked in digital marketing for all these years and I've learned so much about like lead generation and, trying to get people down your funnel and all of this. But ironically, we've come so far with technology and still the best way to close a deal is face to face, whether that's,
Absolutely.
in the room or like on a Zoom call, but it's still, we don't want to buy things from a robot. We still want the
Yeah.
human touch. And I think we want it more so than ever, not only in terms of like sales and business, but just in life.
Yep.
And I see these conferences and events, as overwhelming as they can be and as intense as they can be, people love them primarily because, again, it's the social interaction that we're all craving so badly. I think, especially for, let's say, someone works from home, they work remotely, maybe they're out in some faraway suburb or small town. They could literally also, just like the Meals on Wheels, even a young person could go for weeks on end without having any human interaction.
Yep.
And humans are social creatures. We were literally built, wired for connection. So the fact that we're now taking that away, yeah, I think it's very, very sad. And I'm with you.
Yep.
I'm very passionate about this. It's why I originally started the podcast. I want to do something in this space as well eventually. I'm still not sure what, but I think it's just a crisis. And I actually can't end this episode without talking about dating as well. I mean, I'm not sure how aware you are of the current dating landscape. I was not aware of it either. I had been in a long-term relationship. I was with someone for 7 years. So I only now recently re-entered the dating world for the first time in a very long time. And I have a whole episode about it as well. And just like how the dating apps are not working. It's also becoming a crisis. Have you done any research on that in writing this book?
Personal research. So
Okay.
I got divorced about 29 years ago and I started using the dating apps, but I got a totally different story.
Okay.
I lived in Washington, D.C., and there's an extra 100,000 educated, intelligent, smart women in Washington,
Yeah, I
D.C.
believe it.
So all I had to
Right.
do was put up my profile, and I was like suddenly the most popular guy in town.
Really?
It was
Oh,
like, where
wow.
was this in high school? And it's like, man, I couldn't buy a date in high
When was
school.
this though? Was this recently or was this like years ago?
This was 20 years ago. But then 10 years later, I had a relationship end and I went back out and, I probably had 25 dates, but I met my current girlfriend who we've been together for 10 years on match.com.
That was 10 years ago. It's
Yeah.
changed in the last 10 years. This is what I'm saying. So I met my ex from Tinder, which is the worst of all the apps. So literally when these apps first came on the scene, people were using them to meet in real life. That was the whole purpose of the app was, oh wow, this is so great. This is connecting me with people in my neighborhood or people in my area. And then we're going to meet for a date in real life. But in the last, I would say 5 years, especially since COVID, apps have completely changed. And that's what I was getting at. So I didn't realize that either because I used them in the past. And I know many people who got into relationships from these apps and they were great. But in the last few years, I think it's a combination of the way that the algorithms have shifted and the monetization of the apps. Again, they don't want you to meet someone in real life ultimately because then they're losing money. Combined
True.
with the way that the apps work, a lot of the features now you have to pay for. So, like to actually get to that level where you can meet somebody worthwhile from the app, they're not going to show you the users that you'd be most compatible with, even though they have that data, because they don't want you to leave the app. So basically,
Wow.
they're like keeping you on the app indefinitely. Again, I don't think you're aware of this. I wasn't aware of it either. But basically, the way that people interact now on the apps, it's almost been so gamified that they don't actually want to ever go on real dates. I find so what tends to happen with me on apps is I'll match with someone. Sometimes I write the first message, sometimes they do, and then nothing happens. We just ghost each other. It's
Wow.
like people are just on the apps for validation or something, but not for, they're so afraid to meet someone in real life or not be perceived as they are in real life versus their persona on the app. I have tons and tons of just anecdotal research on this, and I've listened to many podcasts about it, but there's definitely a dating crisis happening. Fewer and fewer people are entering relationships. Fewer and fewer people
Yeah.
are getting married, having sex even. And it's also further contributing to the loneliness crisis because they're lacking companionship. And if you don't have a partner, if you don't have someone in your life on a regular basis, that's also further contributing to the loneliness crisis because they're not able to. Well, also in terms of mating and procreating, there's going to be less and less of that.
Yep.
And yeah, oh my gosh, I think you should add this to your to the
Well,
book. To the,
if here's the thing, I'd have to go do some research. I don't think
yeah.
that would really fly at home if I signed up for a bunch of the dating
Oh
apps
no,
now.
no, no. I didn't mean that, but I'm telling you, like anecdotally, yeah,
I
it's
could go interview people.
yes, that's what I meant. I didn't mean
All
you
right.
specifically, but just ask around, especially I would say the younger, like Gen Z and millennials who are trying
Yep.
to date right now. And if you'd ask, take a random poll of all my single friends, everybody is kind of just giving up. They're giving
And
up on dating.
that's where we think one of the uses of our friendship kit is if you're the creator of the event and you have 50 people there, suddenly you've got your pick of all 50 people. It's like you just had this friendship event and now you know who all these people are and you can go, oh, I'm going to follow up with that one, that one, that one, even if I didn't get to meet them at the friendship event. So sometimes you got to take things into your own hands, right?
Oh, I agree.
So,
And I think the best relationships start as friendships.
yeah.
So ideally, it could eventually evolve into dating. I think they're very much related. And I think anybody who's in a long-term relationship has no idea how bad it's become.
Being part of the human race is very difficult on so many fronts these days. And it's being compounded with AI because nobody knows, as AI grows exponentially, nobody knows what it's going to do to society. And I mean, if anybody tells you they know, they don't. I mean, it could be great, it could be terrible, it's probably going to be somewhere in the middle, but it's an exponential space. So to me, when somebody starts predicting AI, it's like trying to pick the one planet out of the 250 million that are out there in the universe that might have human beings on them. And it's like, yeah, good luck with that.
Well, we are just about out of time. I want to quickly do my little rapid fire round and then we'll close up. So basically, just answer the first thing that comes to mind when I ask you the next few questions. So, are you a morning person or a night owl?
Oh, morning person.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
How would you describe the loneliness epidemic in one word?
Accelerating.
What is the most underrated way to meet people as an adult?
Your old friends, rekindling old friends you've forgotten.
Great. It's similar with sales. It's like the warm leads versus the cold leads. What is one thing that people do that accidentally is making loneliness worse?
They are sticking their head in their phone even when they're at a social event.
Oh, yes. I hate that. I notice that too. And I get really mad at people when they do that. Like you're out to dinner and everyone's just on their phones. Oh, don't get me started on that. What is the best friendship that you ever made unexpectedly?
Best friendship. I made a bunch of those. That's a tough one. I'll have to think about that.
And finish this sentence. Most people don't realize that friendship requires blank.
Work. Friendship
Investment.
is a verb. Right. Friendship is a verb.
You need to nurture it. You need to water the plants. Okay, amazing. Well, Pete, thank you so much for your time.
No worries.
Before I let you go, just wanted to ask where my audience can connect with you, learn more about Perdata, Connexus, where you recommend they go to find more about your work.
They can find me, my email, pete@perdata.ai. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on our perdata.ai site, our getconnexus.com, friendshipevent.com. If you want to do a friendship event right now, we'll walk you all through it. We're easy to find and approachable.
Okay, amazing. I will link all of that in the show notes, as well as your book, Dying for Friendship. That's available on Amazon, correct?
Yep. Softcover, hardcover, and Kindle.
Okay, amazing. Well, thank you all so much for listening to another episode of Natalie Saves the World, one podcast at a time. We didn't save the world today, but we did have a really interesting conversation about why we're lonelier than ever and what it's going to take to get back to each other and find friendship again. To everyone listening, if this episode resonated with you, please share it with a friend. As we've discussed, this really is a crisis and we really do want to help. Share it with somebody you've been meaning to reach out to even. That's probably a great place to start. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. I'd always love to hear your thoughts, and I'll see you in the next episode.